This is the conclusion of the Applied Counterpoint online course. Today we'll talk about two things. First of all, counterpoint outside of the standard contrapuntal forms, and secondly, counterpoint in other harmonic styles. So, uses of counterpoint outside of the common contrapuntal forms. Once the student has mastered fugue, there are many situations calling for contrapuntal skill even outside of the standard contrapuntal forms. The single most important application of counterpoint lies in orchestration and in chamber music. Often music requires secondary lines that are interesting for the player, but not so much as to distract from the main lines. In these cases, composers often resort to certain standard kinds of accompaniment figuration, like arpeggios, repeated notes, and so on. But if these accompanying parts are not to turn into monotonous formulas, it's best to add a bit of contrapuntal interest. Here's an example. The first three bars present a simple arpeggio formula, not particularly interesting. The second system presents the same harmony, but now with some added appoggiaturas and passing notes. What was previously an anonymous accompaniment now has a more distinctive character. The third example carries the same idea even further. As we can see here, there's a continuum ranging from totally predictable figuration to highly personalized counterpoint. This is one of the places where great composers stand out due to the effort they take with the secondary details. When writing orchestral or chamber music, a good composer will take the trouble to make the secondary parts musically interesting, but always without distracting from the main line. This is just the tip of a very big iceberg. The student should examine examples of secondary lines in music from the standard repertoire for chamber ensemble or for orchestra to see how the composer individualizes them. Another area where a composer's ease in counterpoint is immediately apparent is in transitions and development passages. A touch of overlapping counterpoint can make the punctuation between phrases more subtle. Similarly, since contrapuntal lines often overlap, they can be useful in tying two sections together during a transition. Also, when sketching a large work, a systematic exploration of variants of the material along the lines of a stretto table can lead to unexpected discoveries that then enrich the form. Even when the texture is not explicitly contrapuntal, such variants can add details to enrich the music. These points explain why this course is called Applied Counterpoint. Now let's talk about counterpoint in other harmonic styles. In my online modern harmony course on YouTube, I explore various kinds of modern harmony in detail. I won't repeat them here, except to note there is one condition that applies to all the techniques I discussed there. The harmony must be audibly coherent. Generally speaking, if harmony is not to sound random, it requires 1. Enough audible consistency, which really means limitations in the harmonic resources being used, so as to form expectations and to distinguish non-chord tones and wrong notes. Second, it requires variation of harmonic density and tension, permitting various degrees of punctuation. And third, it requires some kind of voice leading. That is to say, the notes in the harmony must arrive and depart with some kind of audible linear logic. Of course, if the harmonic language is not audibly coherent, no amount of counterpoint is going to make it better. Once the composer settles on a coherent harmonic style, most kinds of counterpoint we have seen in this course are easily generalized. The principles behind coherent melodic lines, gradation of peaks, avoiding dead spots, motives, and so on, remain the same no matter what the harmonic idiom being used. Since having multiple melodic lines at the same time inevitably creates chords, if the core sound is clear, as described above, the counterpoint can be organized around these focal points in exactly the same way it's organized around triads and tonal harmony. Of course, each kind of harmony has its own characteristics which the composer has to understand, but that's not the subject of this course. For that, see my series of 33 YouTube videos on modern harmony. The link is below. Here are a few short examples of counterpoint and other harmonic idioms. First, harmony by fourths. Note that most of the sonorities arriving on the beat in this example create chords in fourths or fifths. Where they don't, the result is clearly because of non-harmonic tones. For example, what looks like the F-sharp 6/4 chord on the last beat of measure 1 is really an accented neighbor note going to the real chord tone, the G-sharp. The same is true of the E, G-sharp on the second quarter note of measure 2. Many of the leaps in the lines are also fourths and fifths. Note in this open, rather austere sound world, parallel fifths like those in the second or third beats of measure 2 don't sound out of place. Example 2, Pauley modal harmony. Here the bottom parts for strings are in F mixolydian and the top parts for women's choir are in D major. Different registers and tone colors are essential for clear polymodal writing. Notice the way the bottom parts start alone so the listener can form a better idea of their sound world before the choral parts enter. Also, although there appear to be lots of 6-note chords here, the upper string parts are really just doubling the bass line. In polymodal harmony, one of the challenges is to avoid having the harmony become too thick. This is one way to lighten the texture a bit. The cadence here is marked by the fact that all the parts finally come into rhythmic unison in measure 7 and then stop in measure 8. Our last example would be mirror harmony. Here the two voices are in a strict mirror relationship around G, the axis of symmetry. To provide some rhythmic variety, they include some non-harmonic tones where one part is moving and the other is not. The two parts finally come together in measure 5 with the same rhythm in order to lead into the cadence on the unison G. To conclude, one final point. We've seen here to what extent sophisticated counterpoint requires rich harmony. In the same way, much advanced harmony grows naturally out of the melodic activity of individual lines. We study harmony and counterpoint separately for pedagogical simplicity, but we don't have one brain for harmony and another for counterpoint. One can't exist without the other. In the long run, both disciplines come together, allowing the composer to create the richest music possible.